What's going on, everybody? Brezzy43 here, coming at you with our next video. Um, Last video I shared some team building guide tips for you with things that I do when I team build, and how I arrive at a lot of the conclusions that I arrive at. So I hope that was super helpful. But today I want to rewind a little bit more and talk about what I left you all with at the end of my last video, or the one before this one, where I talked about this one of the teams on the RVGC circuit when I was sharing all these wonderful resources you can use to see what other people are doing, and I stumbled on a super awesome Sun team that featured a new restricted Pokemon. Something that towards the end of my Series 7 days, I discovered how insanely busted Glastrier was. And now people are using Calyrex Ice, and it's even more busted. And Snoot is the guy who, or the player on VGC, or our VGC circuit, who used this team. I don't have his exact spreads, and I don't have his exact moves or items or anything like that. All I was able to derive from his from the picture was just the Pokemon he used, but I put together a reasonable team comparison to that one, and I used it yesterday in my ranked battles. I went 7-2 last night to make it back to Master Ball. The two games that I did lose, one of them, well, two of them technically were the same mistakes, but one of them feels much more like a loss to me because I brought the wrong Pokemon. Essentially, I wasted a slot, but more on that later. I want to talk about this team because this team is super awesome. So, very strong team. I'm going to go ahead and jump into the team here. So, first and foremost, the namesake, the restricted Pokemon, Calyrex Ice. This thing is stupid. First, you should note the stats. 165 attack, 150 defense, 130 special defense, and 100 HP. That is nuts. Absolutely nuts. We were doing some calcs trying to figure out what could beat this thing. There's not much. Basically nothing one-shots it if it's Dynamaxed. And it's absolutely absurd. There's a very potent combination that people are using right now. I like to refer to it as MimiRex, where Mimikyu. Mimikyu is a fantastic partner for Calyrex. So Calyrex is a reasonable Trick Room Sweeper. 50 base speed is not the slowest Pokemon we've ever seen. If you're able to grind for a low speed one, that's fine. I think mine is perfect, so I just have perfect on mine. But this spread is pretty basic. If you wanted to drop some HP in favor of some special defense, or if you're running weakness policy, maybe you can aim for another jump here instead of running all of this extra. There's the jump. So we go 196. Maybe you do this instead. This is a reasonable one too. Anyway, this Pokemon is absolutely absurd. Its ability is called As One, which is a combination of Unnerve and Chilling Neigh. Chilling Neigh is Glacier's signature ability that is essentially Moxie. Every time this Pokemon picks up a knockout, it gives you an attack boost. Unnerve is a reasonable ability. I wouldn't necessarily classify it as the best ability you could use, but it does have, when it's paired with another ability like this and you get a fusion, it's pretty strong, especially when you start considering that berries are a really popular item in VGC. Citrus berries, resistance berries, pinch berries, everything that you can possibly want is in this ability. So its ability is very snowbally, which is why I wanted to explore weakness policy. If you can get a policy proc, or even if you can't, you pick up a knockout, you can potentially boost one of your other stats at the same time as picking up an attack boost. It's really, really, really big. You can set up Hail with Glacial Lance, which is the best move that this Pokemon learns, but it also gets incredible coverage. High horsepower close combat are pretty standard. It also gets Heavy Slam, which is a really good steel move to boost your defenses, but it also gets Seed Bomb, which I have seen a little bit of to pressure Kyogre if you don't have another grass type on your team. So superpower, close combat's better than superpower. Sorry, Throat Chop could potentially be reasonable. Zen Headbutt might see some utility. It's stab as well. But yeah, ultimately this thing does a lot. It also it's a very good Dynamax candidate, but it also makes for a really powerful end game with Glacial Lance being a spread move. If you opt for Assault Vest, I think Assault Vest might be the next best item on Calyrex, because you get the you just become a huge bulk machine. It's part of the thing that people were doing with Glastrier in at the end of Series 7, was just giving it an Assault Vest. You get to run an extra coverage move. It pairs better with some redirection to just keep it safe, but a really reasonable item as well. Another possibility is to run Trick Room. Oops, I said Truckshes. Trick Room. Calyrex is a Trick Room sweeper that can set up its own Trick Room, which is really powerful. It pairs nicely alongside Butterfree or any other form of redirection on your team, Amoonguss, Togekiss, things like Indeedee, things like this. Set up Trick Room reliably and then start sweeping. So Trick Room is really, really nice to have if you wanted to do it. I opted for Protect because my team is not as reliant as the Trick Room, but it also has very good ways to set it up. More on that later. But Protect or Trick Room is fine in this slot. You could cut Close Combat for another for the Steel move to boost your defenses. I like Close Combat because it attributes more to the snowballing effect, and it can help you reset Intimidate drops from things like Incineroar. Yeah, so that's Calyrex. Now we arrive at the reason why I was drawn to this team, which was Mimikyu. Mimikyu is one of my favorite all-time Pokemon. Ghost Fairy is an incredible typing. You only have two weaknesses. You're weak to Steel and you're weak to Ghost, but you have 3 immunities. You have you have normal fighting and dragon as immunities. You pick up some resistances with, you get a 4 times to bug. You also resist, you're neutral to poison because of Ghost. I thought there was one more. Maybe I'm not remembering correctly. We can look it up, but Mimikyu is a really good typing overall. Why would you want to run Mimikyu over Dusclops, right? That's the question, because obviously, as you can tell, I have a Shadow Sneak here on my Mimikyu, so I can Shadow Sneak my Calyrex for the weakness policy. Dusclops is a bulkier mon. Why wouldn't you want to run Dusclops? Well, right now, Mimikyu is probably the most reliable Trick Room setter. Maybe tied with Porygon 2 or just behind Porygon 2, because Porygon 2 is very, very bulky. But Mimikyu, the Pokemon that pressure Mimikyu right now are usually very, very fast Pokemon. Things like Calyrex Shadow, Solgaleo, Zacian. These really fast Pokemon that can't get through the disguise. Solgaleo can with Sunsteel Strike, but excuse me. But Behemoth Blade and Astral Barrage cannot get through disguise. So that's you have your own built-in pseudo protect or focus sash, if you will, that requires 2 attacks to go into Mimikyu to knock it out. Mental Herb is really, really good at helping to ensure that you can get Trick Room up when you need to. Further attributing to Mental Herb, or further attributing to Mimikyu being probably the most reliable Trick Room setter available to a team like this. Excuse me. So this spread is something that I came up with. I didn't put too much thought into it, but I started off with a defensive spread. I will show you what it was. I started off with a spread that looked like this. And I didn't run Play Rough. I was running like Safeguard or something like that. And this was my spread, and this was the majority of what I was doing. I was relying on Will-O-Wisp and Shadow Sneak and Mimikyu's reasonable bulk to let it stick around for a while and just kind of be annoying and set up Trick Room. You don't have to run Mental Herb on a set like this, but I started off with this when I was theory crafting the team. So I ended up arriving at my other set because I wanted to have Mimikyu. I wanted to lean into a bit more of what Mimikyu does better than Dusclops, which is being a reasonable offensive threat. So if we go back, This is the spread I arrived at. This all that I did was I dumped 252 HP into my my HP stat because it's the lowest stat. I want to shore that up. I aimed for my second nature jump here, 141 to 143, and I invested a good chunk into defense, a little bit into special defense, and then a value point into speed to not waste any EVs, right? And I substituted this safeguard for play rough. You could run taunt in that slot too. But what does this do? Well, this allows Mimikyu to actually be a reasonable offensive threat when you consider that after you set up Trick Room with Calyrex, you have the ability to boost Mimikyu's attack stat with Max Knuckle. So Mimikyu all of a sudden can start to hit things pretty hard with Play Rough. Play Rough already deals with some things pretty well, like Urshifu Dark doesn't take Play Rough. Also things like, what's another example? Palkia doesn't really appreciate it and doesn't really pressure you that hard, unless your disguise is busted. But this set to me felt like it was about as reasonable as I could get to being a mixture, still giving me some offensive or some bulk capabilities, but really mostly being offensive. You could, if you wanted to just run a spread, you could do something like this and just lean into it even more. But I think I like where I arrived at with this because it does a little bit of both. And Mimikyu is an interesting Pokemon because, like I stated in one of my last videos, it's a Pokemon that like already doesn't survive hits that it's not supposed to survive, and it doesn't die to hits that it's not supposed to die to. So its bulk is pretty reasonable. But by doing something like this, you synergize a bit better with Calyrex, where your Shadow Sneaks can start to add up to some decent damage, and Play Rough as well. And 96 speed is pretty fast, but it's not unreasonable, considering that a lot of things are so much faster right now. Yeah, so that's Mimikyu. A lot of customization with Mimikyu. If you didn't want to run Will-O-Wisp, Mimikyu gets access to Taunt, Safeguard. It gets access to... there was Swords Dance. It gets access to Woodhammer. Just a ton of really good offensive and weird niche moves that it does get Protect as well, like all Pokemon do. Pain Split, but I wanted to lean into... I still wanted Will-O-Wisp for the offensive attackers. I wanted Trick Room, obviously, and then Shadow Sneak for my policy, as well as for Calyrex, Shadow Rider, and then Play Rough to just be offensive. So that sums up the MimiRex core. But Torkoal was where I went to next, or where I was looking at next, because Torkoal makes a lot of sense on this team. I didn't change much of the spread from what a normal offensive Torkoal would be. I actually think I went with this one instead. But this Torkoal can help Calyrex deal with steel types, and can also just be really annoying. Eruption, Heat Wave, Scorching Sands, and Protect was where I went with Charcoal. Honestly, I ran Scorching Sands on my old Sun team and I really liked it, but you could run a bunch of different moves here. I think really only a strong fire attack like Eruption or Heat Wave is probably necessary. I've seen some people run Overheat. I've seen some people run Earth Power, Solar Beam. These are all really good options. But I ran Scorching Sands. Potentially might change it to Solar Beam later, depending. But that's Torkoal. This Venusaur is my bulky Venusaur spread for my Groudon team. Nothing special about this that you can't see in one of my other videos. Just a lot of customization for this mon too. You can run Cobra Berry, you can run Life Orb, you can run Assault Vest, you can run a bunch of different things. Earth Power or Weather Ball are both really good here. I opted to not run Sleep Powder because one, I have Butterfree that has Sleep Powder, but two, a lot of people played around it last night when I was playing, and it got me a lot of momentum in the early game because they were so scared of Sleep Powder. So that just kind of went into my like that was kind of a niche that I got to use against people. So this is the Venusaur set that I liked. It takes what it's supposed to take it when it's Dynamaxed. It doesn't take much when it's not Dynamax, so Koba Berry or something might be better. But I liked this spread a lot. Optimized for bulk. You could just go timid max speed as well if you wanted to. But yeah, this is Venu. Next, I want to talk about the Butterfree. The Butterfree, very standard. I would not change this mon away from this because this is the best that you can do. For Butterfree, the stats are abysmal. But Butterfree does something very specific very well. Compound Eyes. For those of you that don't know, Compound Eyes increases the move's accuracy by 30%. So Butterfree saw some usage in the early VGC of Sword and Shield, and it gets Rage Powder, Hurricane, Sleep Powder, Pollen Puff. Some people ran Choice Scarf, but I think Focus Sash is definitely where you want to be right now. And this thing does a couple of things very well. So Compound Eyes gives you run 2 pretty inaccurate moves, excuse me, and you actually make them reasonably accurate. So for those of you that don't know, when you do calculate this, you do a 30% to the accuracy of the move. So the accuracy of the move is 70. So you do 70 times 1.3. So you have a 91% accurate Hurricane, and then you do 71 times 1.3, and you have a 97% accurate Sleep Powder. That's nuts. I didn't miss any Sleep Powders. I missed 1 Hurricane. But Butterfree is very good next to Mimikyu if you need to get up Trick Room. In that scenario, if you lead Butterfree Mimikyu, Butterfree does a really good job of dying. And I say that kind of as a joke, but also in reality, to be serious, it dies when you need it to die and gives you a big momentum switch into something that's very good. That, like, you know, if you go Butterfree Mimikyu, Rage Powder, Trick Room, and your opponent uses any move, basically Butterfree's going to die. And then you get to switch into Calyrex or Torkoal or whatever you've got in the back to start dishing out damage. It's a big momentum change, but also if your opponent chooses to take a slower route, or they've led spread moves and you can't really reasonably get around the Rage Powder doesn't make a lot of sense. You still have Hurricane and Sleep Powder to be disruptive, which is really annoying for the opponent to deal with. Hurricane has a 30% chance to confuse. I did bring a Whimsicott down to Sash with this. I did 2-hit a Venusaur. I did also, what else did I hit? I think I brought a Tornadus down to Sash, or at least did a really good chunk to it. So it's a really strong move, and base 90 special attack is not the most unreasonable special attack ever. So, I mean, Mimikyu's base 90 attack, and we're running it, and it was impressive for me too. So that's Butterfree. I would stick with these moves. If you wanted to run Gmax Butterfree and try to squeak in a bug move and just skip the Protect, that's up to you. But I like this a lot. I'm not going to max Butterfree. So the reason why I chose Butterfree, or I'm assuming the Snoot player chose Butterfree, was because they didn't want to compound their types. By running a Moongus, you get a second Grass Poison type. By running Volcarona or Follow Me or whatever, you compound other types. And Butterfree, like I said, is a very good Trick Room Rage Powder user because it dies when you need it to die, specifically, is what I noticed. And then Hurricane and Sleep Powder are really strong. So I would recommend Butterfree, or at least trying it out. The last mon is Landorus. Landorus is a pretty standard Assault Vest set. I wanted Landorus. I stuck with Landorus for Snoot's team because I assumed it's a really good answer to Sun. I don't know, like I said, I don't know what EVs or item or nature or moves that Snoot was using, but Assault Vest allows you to take the excuse me, the Wildfire a lot better from Charizard. There's only one special thing about this spread, and that's that Jolly 196 speed outspeeds Zacian at +1. So that's the only difference there. And it also speed ties or outspeeds Calyrex Shadow as well, which is important to note. Otherwise, I dumped the rest into special attack. I put 12 points here to bring us to an even number for AV. Excuse me, since you get with AV being the multiplier, you actually get a second point for the price of 1. So again, just to show that if you take 101 times 1.5, you get 151 stat because Pokemon doesn't round, versus 102 times 1.5, you actually get 153. So you get, for your 1 EV point, you actually get 2 stat points. So that's why I did that. The rest was dumped into HP. The only thing that's different than a lot of other Landorus sets is that I'm not running U-turn. I'm running Superpower instead of U-turn. Superpower was very, very good for me at pressuring things, but also, again, being able to synergize with Mimikyu. So this is the team. I'll put up a rental at the end, but I want to talk through a couple of matchups. So my opponent, a couple of my opponents, they were leading. Let's talk about. I played against a bunch of different teams. My 2 losses were to Calyrex Shadow and Zygarde, I think. And I made the same mistake. I put that in quotes because I don't actually know if it was a mistake or not, but let me lay out the scenario. So I don't know if people are just expecting Calyrex to not run Protect, but both games it occurred where I had Calyrex and Mimikyu next to each other with Mimikyu's disguise busted, so it can be attacked and killed. Or one of the games it wasn't busted. Yeah, one of the games it wasn't busted. And my opponent's, my obvious play, in my opinion, my Trick Room's over, right? My Trick Room has just ended, and I have Mimikyu on the field ready to reset up Trick Room, right? My thought process was that, oh, protecting Calyrex here is obvious. I should not do it because my opponent's going to double the Mimikyu expecting my Protect. And both times I was wrong. Both times they doubled my Calyrex and I died. One of them was an Astral Barrage from a Calyrex, so it didn't matter. And so I think that with that in mind, you should just make that obvious play in that scenario, because I'm assuming that people don't think that you're running Protect. I don't know. But that happened to me twice where one of them was 2 single target attacks. So if I just protect my Calyrex, I don't take any damage. I set up Trick Room for free, and then I just easy win. So that happened both my losses, but one of my losses against the Zygarde team, I did not bring Torkoal, and I should have brought Torkoal. Instead, I brought Landorus, which was basically useless. So I brought Mimikyu, Butterfree, Calyrex, Landorus instead of Torkoal. And I think Torkoal would have given me a bit better shot against something else that my opponent had in the back that I can't remember for sure. But yeah, so that was both my losses. So if you're in a situation where protecting Calyrex seems obvious, do it anyway, because I think people are not expecting you to have Protect. So let's talk about some of the teams that I do remember facing, or at least some of the members. I faced against a Charizard. It was G-Max as well. Sableye. Groudon. Porygon. Glastrier team. Plus something else. I don't remember what it was. So against this team, this is kind of an interesting scenario because I can kind of infer a lot of information. Sableye most likely is running Sunny Day. That's one thing that I know for sure. Charizard's probably going to be the Life Orb. Solar Power. Groudon could be a couple of different items. It was Porygon 2 as well, sorry. And Glastrier could be a couple of different items as well. But the reality of the situation is that my Trick Room is good, but it's not better than theirs. Their Glastrier underspeeds my Calyrex. That's kind of a chaotic neutral matchup. Granted, they can't hit me super effectively unless they have a steel move, but they can still hit me really hard. And if they are boosting their defenses or whatever, things get kind of scary for me kind of quickly. So going back to our team, let's go ahead and snip this real quick. Okay, going back to our team, what do we want to lead against this? I think I still want to bring my Trick Room mode, but Venusaur doesn't look great. And Torkoal doesn't really look great either. Or not Torkoal, excuse me, Butterfree. Butterfree could set up Trick Room, but my opponent's going to knock it out and potentially could lead Charizard. I didn't want to bring Butterfree. I figured I wanted to, what I wanted to do in this game was leverage the fact that I don't need to be inside Trick Room. But this is a unique one because my opponent, they might have had Venu as their last one, I don't remember, but my opponent didn't have the usual Sun stuff. They don't have a Venusaur from what I remember. They they had Thundurus. That was their last mod. Yeah, they had Thundurus. So what I ended up doing was leading Landorus plus Mimikyu, because that gives me a couple of different options. One, that intimidates the Groudon if they lead it. Two, I didn't think they were going to bring Thundurus against Calyrex Ice, especially since I was also potentially going to lead Venusaur. Also, two, I wanted to have the option of like being offensive if I needed to be, or being defensive with Trick Room if I needed to be. Like if my opponent leads Charizard Groudon, then I'm probably going to want to set Trick Room and maybe pivot out with Lando or something, or max Lando and go for the Charizard. But I'm kind of forced to bring Lando because it's the best thing that I have to deal with Charizard, right? So I lead Mimikyu Landorus and I bring Torkoal Calyrex in the back. My opponent leads Sableye Groudon. So kind of a passive lead. Landorus isn't really pressured by Groudon, neither is Mimikyu. Groudon can't really pressure I think I just said that. Sorry. Groudon can't really pressure Landorus and also can't really pressure Mimikyu. Could set up Sword Stance, but remember we have the burn. So I decided to max Lando turn 1. And I went for turn 1 max Lando, attack your Sableye, and then I doubled the Sableye to just kill it and not deal with the quashing and stuff like that. My opponent brings in Porygon. I forget what they did with Groudon. They might have gone for P-Blades or something. It was a weird Groudon set. It was no attack invested Groudon with weakness policy. So really interesting. So that was the Groudon, but my opponent brings in Porygon. I'm assuming he's going to go for the Trick Room, so I double the Porygon. I go for Max Knuckle from Lando plus Play Rough from Mimikyu. This time, I don't remember what the Groudon does, but basically we get into a position where our opponent's able to protect their last turn of my Dynamax and recover with Porygon because they've set Trick Room. So now I go for the Knuckle into the Porygon again, and I try to burn the Groudon. Well, the burn didn't work, and because they protected, Porygon goes back down to really low. At this point, Porygon Ice Beams my Lando, and I Play Rough the Groudon, and the Groudon goes for P-Blades, but it doesn't do much. I go for Will-O-Wisp, and I connect this time. But Lando survives, picks up the KO with Rock Slide. My opponent went for P-Blades, did some damage to my Mimikyu, but my Lando's immune. Now the next turn, my opponent has Trick Room going still. Their Groudon's at half HP because it's been burned and hit with a Play Rough. Or it's going to be to half HP because I'm going to Play Rough at this turn. And then my opponent Dynamax's Glastrier, KO's Lando, gets the boost, whatever. I go for Will-O-Wisp into the Glastrier, get the burn. Then the next turn I bring in Torkoal, and I go for Eruption plus Play Rough, deal a good chunk of damage to the Glastrier, pick up the KO on Groudon. Glastrier picks up the KO on my Torkoal. Now we're to the last turn of Trick Room and the last turn of my opponent's max. I protect the Calyrex and I go for a Play Rough into the Glastrier, and then I Trick Room's over, and my Calyrex is now faster than his Glastrier. So you can kind of leverage it a little bit here, but like I talked about, Lando Mimikyu was fantastic. So let's go to another team that I remember facing. This one was a bit more interesting. This one was Kyogre, Tornadus, Kingdra, Kartana, Incin, and then something else. I don't remember what. So from this, what can we derive? Let's go ahead and go back to our team. Well, um, because we are the Torkoal team, um, I don't think our opponent knows that they can't lead Kyogre, and I also don't really plan on leading Torkoal. But against this team, I can lead Venu. I don't have to go for Butterfree. I can go for Venu, and I can threaten whatever they lead, and I can just lead Venusaur Mimikyu. What I used to do against when I played Venusaur Dusclops with T-Tar and stuff, I used to lead Venu Clops because it exerts so much switching potential and so much offensive capability, and just like offers you a multitude of options, right? You've got Trick Room, you've got Dynamax Venu, you've got Sleep Powder Venu, you've got Switch Venu, you've got Switch Clops, like so many things that you can do that can keep your opponent on their toes. The same is true for Venu Mimikyu lead. So against this, I don't really need Butterfree, because I can threaten the same thing that Butterfree threatens with Venusaur. My opponent doesn't have any real way to stop Trick Room because unless they lead Kyogre Tornadus, in which case if they do, then I can just switch in Torkoal and or just Dynamax Venusaur and switch in Torkoal for the Mimikyu and save Mimikyu for later. So like I get so many options there, right? Like if my opponent leads Tornogre, I can switch Mimikyu into Torkoal, Dynamax Venusaur, and attack the Kyogre. If my opponent leads Kartana plus Tornadus, I can just get a free Trick Room setup, or I can switch the Hurricane can't really offensively pressure me unless it hits. It's 70% accurate. So, but Venusaur keeps my opponent on their toes and threatens a lot of their mons. So my opponent, I lead Venusaur Mimikyu and I bring Torkoal Calyrex in the back. My opponent leads Tornadus Kingdra. And then they bring Incin plus Kyogre, I assume. I can't remember because we didn't get very far in this battle. My opponent goes for the taunt into the Mimikyu, fails because of Mental Herb, or connects and then consumes the Mental Herb, and then Dynamaxes Kingdra and knocks out the Venusaur. I set Trick Room. Now I get to bring in the Calyrex with full momentum, 4 turns of Trick Room, and I can Dynamax and start going after the Kingdra. Now, I'm expecting my opponent to switch the Tornadus into Incineroar, so I could Knuckle that slot, but I decide it's not worth it. I'm just going to go after the Kingdra because I think that Max Knuckle plus Play Rough from Mimikyu is a KO. Keep in mind, this is what I was talking about, boosting Mimikyu's attack. My opponent goes for Rain Dance on Torn, expecting me probably to go after the Torn, and instead, I just pick up a KO on their Kingdra because Max Knuckle plus +1 Play Rough KO. So I get to KO the Kingdra. My opponent brings in Tornadus, or he brings in Kyogre, and then I get to go for Quake and all this. Like it was just too much. So this is where the Calyrex Mimikyu thing really came into effect, boosting the attack. And Venusaur threatens this a lot. And I don't really need Landorus, right? Because Landorus doesn't really do much. It dies to Kyogre, dies to Kingdra, doesn't match up that great into Kartana, and also not amazing into Tornadus, right? So that was that. I think that's the two main ones I wanted to go over. I did a lot of leading Butterfree Mimikyu just to guarantee Trick Room. The only Pokemon that I actually did not max at all last night was Venusaur. I maxed Calyrex 7 out of my 9 games, and I maxed Landorus the other 2. Calyrex doesn't have to Dynamax. It's obviously very good if it does. But Glacial Lance is a spread move, so you can just save it for the end game, set up Trick Room with. You could potentially lead Venusaur Mimikyu, bring Torkoal Calyrex in the back, and then you could switch in Torkoal for Mimikyu and Dynamax the Venusaur, get off a bunch of damage, and then late game bring in Mimikyu, set up Trick Room, and then bring in Calyrex at the end for just spread Glacial Lances for a ton of damage. I did forget to save the picture, which I'm really sad about, but I did get Calyrex to +6 last night. I had set up a scenario where I had gotten my opponent tried to stall out Trick Room when I led Mimikyu Butterfree, and I got off a bunch of chip damage between the two of them, and then they KO'd my Butterfree, and I got to switch in Calyrex next to my Mimikyu. and I went for a side Shadow Sneak into my Calyrex, and then Glacial Lance and picked up 2 KOs. So on the first turn Calyrex was in play, I got to +4 attack because I got the 2 knockouts for the Moxie boost, and then I got the weakness policy boost as well. And then the next turn I max knuckled I Dynamax max knuckled, got the KO, got the plus attack from the max knuckle, and then the Moxie boost. So as you can tell, it can snowball very quickly. This Pokemon's very dumb. I hope you all enjoyed as much as I have. I'm gonna go ahead and fire up the Switch here and put on the rental, but yeah, this Mon is just silly. Very, very silly. So let's go ahead and go into the Versus tab. That's fine. I'll go ahead and put up this team as a rental so you guys can use it. I also fixed my capture card, so now I can capture the audio of the game. I'm watching the audio, sorry. So hype. Okay. We're going to go ahead and turn down the desktop audio a bit, though, so that way it doesn't drive you guys insane. Okay. So manage teams to share. Did it not? Oh, I see. I forgot how to do this. Sorry. So I've got some old teams up here because I've been playing some games with a buddy of mine who is learning Pokemon, and we're going through all the escalations. So let's go ahead and check it. Or hang on. Make it public. Yep. All right, there you go. There's your rental code. Definitely check it out if you are interested. I think it's a phenomenal team, and I would recommend using it at least for a little while. Like I said, 9 games, 7-2. Some of the wins did not feel close. The 2 losses felt close. I think Calyrex is a pretty messed up Pokemon, so I hope y'all enjoy this team. Have some fun with it, and let me know how it goes. And I'll talk to everyone else later.